Welcome back. It's my project and I will cry if I want to. Today we're going to tackle the valve body, the spool valves that go for the controls on the crane. We tore those off a long time ago. We've done some other projects on the crane since then, but today hopefully we're going to get those cleaned up and reassembled and possibly back onto the machine. I'm finally back with the valve body from the crane. So it has some oblong gaskets in it, and these are actually cork, I guess, is what the hydraulic shop was telling me. They have a metal clip. I've got one out, I'll show you it. So here's one of the gaskets, and then here is one of the metal clips. So it's kind of like a little split clip that goes in there and kind of locks together and forces this outwards a little bit and holds it in place. The hydraulic shop suggested maybe trying to use an O-ring in its place, but that's not going to work. I'm not going to be able to install this O-ring and get it to hold its place and get that clip in the middle of it. So that's not going to work. I did think about trying to get new material or new cork gaskets. I didn't have much luck. So I'm gonna run with the old ones. So the reason I'm gonna run with the old ones is I think they're gonna be hard to replace correctly, right? I mean, I could get some kind of gasket material and try and cut one in that shape, and you know, I have to make sure it's just the right thickness and everything. Hopefully, they're not the problem. We know that one of the bolts that holds the whole assembly together, this one here, was broken off. And that means that this was not properly squished together. And any leaking that occurred was hopefully a result of that, and not because the actual seals were bad. And I know they're probably very old and they're not as good as they probably could be, but I'm hoping that if I replace that bolt and put this back together, that this will seal. And worst case scenario is I'm gonna have to take this apart again and figure out a different solution and actually replace these seals somehow. I don't think there's a really easy, obvious solution on how to replace these without getting either material and making them, or getting maybe a custom seal made from somebody. I don't think I'm just gonna be able to find this off the shelf somewhere to replace this. So I've got the one section of the valve body disassembled with the spool out of it. This is the cap. But I wanted to give you a view of how this kind of works when it's assembled. So let me grab this other spool. So this spool is essentially, you know, the same or similar to the spool that's in here. It has a spring on it, which is like a centering spring, so that returns it back to its, or helps return it back to its sort of neutral position, where it's not directing flow towards either passage. Since this is one of the ends, it has either the inlet or the outlet. One end is an inlet and one end is the outlet. So both ends have a large fitting on them to go along with their two regular fittings. But the center section only has two lines coming out of it because it's only going to the whatever cylinder or whatever it's operating, and the hydraulic oil coming in is coming in through one of the ports from beside it and going out through the other side. So basically what happens is, and it's quite stiff, so I'm not going to be able to do it with one hand, but this spool, you can imagine, when you either pull or push on the cable will either go forward or backwards. And all of these sort of grooves in it correspond with grooving inside of this body that allows the fluid to either flow into this line or into this line, depending on whether it's pushed or pulled. And that would be like you're in or you're out. So say you wanted your, let's just pretend this one extends and retracts your boom, and we'll say that this is your extension and this is your retraction. So when these move, it will say we want to, you know, say this is extend and we want to extend. When we push this forward, say, it would allow pressurized fluid to run into the cylinder, and at the same time it would allow the non-pressurized fluid, well, not directly pressurized fluid, the return fluid from the other side of the piston in the cylinder to come back and return to the tank. So that's just a little bit of an idea of how these work. You know, I'm no expert on these. You can find better explanations and better videos on how exactly these work, but that's the general idea. Just by moving this spool forward and backwards, you divert fluid through these with these little channels here, and then the rest of the time, it's pretty neat. The tolerance between these spools and the internal bore of this is actually what creates the seal. So there is one set of O-ring and backup washer or backup ring on this spool, but there's not one for each section. It's not sealed like that, and it's just the tolerance that seals it. So it's also very important that I keep each one of these with each one of its actual, so this one's actually for this one, but that's why I'm leaving these two together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this one and put my new seals, you know, in and on it, and set it to the side, and then move on to the next one, which I'll probably do the center section next, and then the other end, kind of go in order, try and keep everything, you know, in line and with its correct pieces, because that's very important. These are kind of matched together. They said it's only 8 feet tall and 6,000 pounds. Okay, I've got one section cleaned up, and I'm going to go ahead and start to assemble it. I did realize that somehow I forgot to get this O-ring that I need. I need 3 of these. They go right in the face of this little cap that holds the spool in. So obviously we're gonna have to get those, but luckily I should be able to just put these on loosely. I could even put the old O-ring in for now if I want, and then get some of these O-rings and replace those before I put this back up onto the crane. So I think I'll still go ahead and start working through this. I gotta figure out which O-rings go where. I don't really remember exactly how it goes. It's been a little while since I tore this apart, but it shouldn't be too complicated to figure out. So we have a backup ring, which we're going to be reusing, and that along with one of these quad rings, goes inside this housing. So we're going to start there. So now the question is, which one goes in first? How do you get it in there? The quad ring or O-ring goes in first, and then the backup ring is actually on this side of it. So I've got a little bit of hydraulic oil in a dish over here, and we'll just coat this with some of that before we try and put it in. There we go. That was a bit of a struggle, but I did get that O-ring in there. The spool gets an O-ring on the end here. That's got to be a quad ring though. So it's going to be this small quad ring is going to go on here. That should go there. Now I should be able to put some hydraulic oil on all of this. And then feed this. Into there. Like so. Then I will toss this old O-ring in for now, but I am going to have to get replacements. This goes on here. I get it over that quad ring. Good. And then this goes over top of that. So now the only open holes we have are all right here. And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take a really clean paper towel, brand new one. I'm going to set it down over on the side. And I'm going to put this face down on top of that paper towel so that nothing can get inside. And we'll leave that one like that and start the next one. So this one here should be our center section. I'm going to go ahead and pull this one apart. All right, third and final one to put together. Got her all cleaned up. So of course we've got our small quad ring, larger quad ring, and backup ring inside of this housing, just like that. Now we'll oil up our spool. I'm gonna put this used O-ring in for right this second, but we are gonna get a new one. Work that onto that quad ring, put our cap on, or retainer, or whatever we wanna call it. There we go, that's number 3. So now we can get all 3 pieces out here, get all the seals put in between them, and get them assembled together. So I'm gonna give it a nice little wipe down. Now, I have to reuse these seals. So, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just wipe them off in there. I think actually what I have to do is put this onto the piece of metal and then put the whole thing in. So there, I've got it on the metal. And then we're gonna go ahead and try and get that whole thing to sit down in there. That looks good. Same thing for these round seals. I was advised that I might be able to replace these with an O-ring from the hydraulic shop I go to. And I don't think that's gonna work because the O-rings they gave me are, I think, too thick. So what they'll end up doing, which they might compress enough that it doesn't matter, really, but what I'm afraid of is that they will hold the housings apart enough that these old seals that I have to use will not seal up. Hopefully this works. If not, we'll make sure we fix it. So this piece doesn't get anything on this side, except for we can wipe it off. But on this side, it gets the other seals. So go ahead and wipe this side. Okay, here we go. Let's put this bad boy together. And it was quite clear in the instructions that these are supposed to have the flat spot where the non-circular part of this go towards the seals. And on the ones over here, it's quite obvious why. Otherwise, it will be on top of the seal. Now, we can put the next piece on. And the last part. There it is. Like I said, I gotta get the O-rings for these yet. And then I'll torque all these down. But it's back together. It's sealed up, so I don't have to worry about contaminants getting in it right now. Got caps on everything. Get those O-rings in there and get this back on the crane. So it looks like cliffhangers are my new thing. So we aren't gonna be able to put this back on the crane today. I was really hoping that this video I would have it back on the crane. We'd at least see if it's leaking, test it out a little bit. But I am a little behind schedule. The hydraulic shop's closed. I missed out on getting those O-rings for this week. So unfortunately, it's just not gonna happen this week. Hopefully next week I'll have that back on the crane and have the crane running and operational again. We'll see. I also have some parts coming for my parts washer if you're following along with that project. So who knows, that may happen next week as well. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And hopefully, like I said, we'll be making some more progress in the next couple weeks, a little more exciting progress. So stay tuned. I'll see you in the next one.